Hello and welcome to this video, and I'm so pleased today to have John Vullo, guitarist extraordinaire, guitar educator. Some of you may have seen his incredible transcriptions of Allan Holdsworth, and I'm a huge Allan Holdsworth fan. I know many watching this channel are huge Allan Holdsworth fan, and recently John has just put up a 5.5-hour video where how many solos did you look at on there?
I looked through about 190, and the video I think has about 160 of examples from them.
So yeah, and it was such an overview of not only Allan's process, but also the whole history of jazz improvisation. I was absolutely blown away, and I thought this video will go down in history. So I really wanted to, meet you and talk to you, John. So I'm so happy to have you here. Nice to meet you. And
the pleasure is all mine. It's always awkward for me to receive all these kind words from people, because it's weird, because I didn't feel like I did anything special in a way. But it's just from my, it's hard to describe. It feels like if I had to do it, probably anyone could have done it. And I think I said that in the video. There are people that I've met. The one great thing about getting really deep into Allan's music is some of the other musicians and people that I've met. And so many of them are not only super friendly, super nice and encouraging, but they're also great musicians. And I feel like I'm almost underneath them in a way, because I didn't go to music school. I didn't do any of this stuff.
Oh, and incredible. I didn't either. So we're both in the same boat,
Yeah.
I watched you play, and you're an incredible guitar player. And
thank you.
To be able to play Allan's stuff, and I'm sure you don't play like that. So you've had to, that's really great. So let's get to know you a little bit better. So where are you based?
I live on Long Island, New York, the home of Jerry Seinfeld and all those wonderful Billy Joel.
And are you a professional musician? Do you play or do you teach?
No, I mean, I guess maybe by definition I am. I don't feel like it, but yeah, I've been teaching. When I was about 17, I decided I wanted to teach guitar, but I've slowly been waning out of it, looking to I've had steady jobs, so I enjoy teaching this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
like the normal how to play a C chord kind of thing. I'm a little tired of. So, but who knows? Maybe because of this, I'll be considered a real professional.
I'm sure, and anything I can do with my channel to help, spread the word. So, how did you get into guitar playing? What was your routine? Who were you into, and how did you get to Allan?
Well, if anyone's seen, watch my videos, they see they have the big Nirvana poster, and it's funny because when I first started to do these videos, I said to myself, I wonder, because I'm not a jazz person, believe it or not. I don't know a lot of jazz guys, I don't know any jazz standards really. Allan just really connected with me. So I wasn't familiar with the group of people there. So it's I wonder if I'm going to get any flack that I'm doing these, deep dives into Allan Holdsworth tunes, and I got a big Nirvana poster. Or people are going to say anything, and they haven't. Which is nice. It's a good feeling, because I guess people take me seriously. But it pretty much started with Nirvana and my dad. My dad plays a little, and they've always had music in the house. We're big Beatles fans. I grew up with the Beatles. But Nirvana was the first band that I was like, okay, I want to be able to do this. And I got it. This sort of relates to Allan, because I got into Nirvana probably very late 1993. And on my birthday in May of '94, I got my first 2 records, which was Nevermind and In Utero. Then a month later, Kurt Cobain kills himself. So I kind of felt like that with Allan, where it was a guy that I was trying to get into. And just when I started to get it, in about early 2017, oh, this is great, I'm understanding it. And he's going to be playing some shows in July in New York. And then he passes away in April. So, there's always an interesting kindredship between those two, even though they're very different. But it started with Nirvana, and then eventually, and I've told this to other students that I teach. I never expected to play like how I play now. It was just through little small goals. So I started for maybe 2 or 3 years just playing Nirvana songs. Then my dad got me a Jimi Hendrix CD, And I said, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. Now, and at the time I was taking guitar lessons, and I was learning out of a Beatles book. So, I would just go through the songs, and I would look at the chords. I wasn't really taking lessons at this point. I was sort of self-taught. And I took like my first lesson. I'm like, oh, I know how to play a C6/9 and, a C7 chord, an F major 7. And my teacher's like, this is how to play the notes on the E string. I didn't care at all. But I just wanted to play what I wanted to play. But then when I heard Jimi Hendrix, then I was like, oh, I want to learn, the pentatonic scale that I was being shown and I wasn't practicing. Then I heard Eddie Van Halen, and it's like, oh, I want to do that. And it just kept building up. I kept on hearing guitar players that I thought were a little bit better. So it went from like Eddie Van Halen to like Randy Rhoads for a little bit, Yngwie Malmsteen, and then it ended with Jason Becker and Marty Friedman, who are still two of my favorite guitar players.
Yeah, pretty.
And it stayed like that for a long time until I kind of got into Sean Lane about 10 years ago. And also Meshuggah. I've been, hugely influenced by Meshuggah and Frederick's lead playing, which is basically like Allan light in a way. So it made sense to me because like Sean Lane and Frederick both had these kind of Allan-like sounds, but they were more, it was easier to understand them. It wasn't as bizarre in form as you just sounding like a guy playing random notes. I could tell sort of what was going on, but it was smarter than that. And then in about 2009, I was starting to get into Allan a little bit. And I saw him.
First heard Allan. How did you feel when you?
I really don't know. I wish I did. So I was working at Sam Ash. I still work there in Carl Place, New York, which is the home of Steve Vai, Joe Satriani. Steve Vai's popped in the store a couple of times. It was cool. And I worked with all these great musicians. And I probably around that time, I heard of Allan. Someone probably mentioned him to me. Actually, when I did my video, an old friend of mine, this guy John Wagner, said, "Hey, you remember I showed you I told you to do the in the Dead of Night solo?" And I know he did because I remember listening to it and wanting to steal one of the lines from it. And said, "I'm going to use this." But I don't remember exactly where it was. I know I downloaded like a bunch of power tab files of people, transcribing and stuff and listening to it. It's like, this sounds like nonsense. I don't get it. But it might have been through Frederick, because he's a big Allan fan, or through, one of my friends. But I know I started to actively try to dip my toe in the water. And this is why I do these videos now, because I clearly remember a time where I didn't get it. And I bought his REH book and the video. And I remember, because I was in a band at the time, going, yeah, I know his whole thing. I know what he does. This is 2009, where I really didn't. But I did that, and I saw him live. And it was an incredible experience, even though I had no idea what he was playing. Like, I didn't know any of his material. But I remember, and it's funny because you can find the video and you can see my comment from, I guess it was like 12 years now, because he did this long chordal section, with the swell stuff that I loved. And I was sitting in the back, and I remember being like, the sound was so enveloping. It like, I've never felt or experienced anything like that, where it felt like I was being lifted by these huge chordal swells, and it was incredibly moving. And I thought I had lost it forever, but I could never. And then somebody uploaded it, and I was like, "That's the moment." I can still see it. I go, "That's the moment." I remember that. So there was like all these little things that got me into wanting to get like that. When I saw Allan and when I see him on stage, I go, like, I want to be able to do that. I just want that command of the instrument. And then I kind of got off the Allan stuff because it just didn't make sense. And I years later talked to a friend of mine, because I tried to listen to it again. And I remember it was my friend Eric Woolman. He goes, because I was saying, I don't want to listen to Allan play. It sounds random, like he's playing weird notes or whatever. And at the time I was playing for 22 years or something, or 20 years. It wasn't like I just started. It was still nonsense to me. And he said something, well, actually, Allan plays very diatonically. I went, really? Okay, let me go back with that new knowledge in my head. And then all of a sudden it just clicked. It was just there. Because I'm not a jazz guy, I was listening to it in the wrong way. All of a sudden, everything just made sense. And it was almost like an addiction. because it was so new. There was nothing that was like that I ever heard, where it was this amazing blend of modern classical music with a rock metal lead sound, but with the freedom elements of jazz. It was all these things that I liked all boiled into one. So I just dove right in and said, this is so foreign to what I listened to. I want to take these ideas and learn them and, you know, get them for my own. So that's basically how that whole journey started. And as you can see, I'm sitting there, you know, 11 years old, 12 years old, playing Smells Like Teen Spirit. Didn't think I was going to get to this point where I was going to have this whole, like, you know, big thing about Allan. But it was a constant, you know, just getting a little better and wanting to learn instead of just like, because I don't think if I knew where I wanted to get to, I don't think I'd ever do it. Just like my video, if I knew it was going to be 5.5 hours when I finished, I wouldn't have done it. It's just my ignorance and my stubbornness. It's like, I'm already this far into it.
Yeah,
I got to finish it, you know?
I think when you hear stuff you like, you know, when you're coming up and you hear stuff you like, that's great. But when you come across a musician that you don't like, but your interest is sparked, and then you put the work in, and then you get even more back, that's you really fall in love with artists. I've had it with a few artists, I think with Frank Zappa, Miles Davis, Gofflin, and Allan Holdsworth. You know,
he was a guy that I said, when I get it, I know I'm gonna like it. I'm gonna love it. I just couldn't, and it was like frustrating because I just couldn't unlock it. But once I did, then it was like, I'm finally here, and it's a great feeling, and that's what I try to come across within my videos. It was like, no one really did those kind of things to like help people not be intimidated. Because when I first, you know, Allan Holdsworth, this guy, every tune must have 7,000 different chords that you've never seen before, and it's intimidating. It feels like I'm not going to be able to attempt that. So what I try to do, and also because of Allan's playing, has made me a better player and it made me enjoy play, because I've said this before in other interviews. I was like in a bad spot. Like, why am I wasting all my time playing the guitar? Who cares if I put this effort into being a chemist or to being a banker? You know, who knows where it would have been. But with Allan, I started to enjoy playing a lot more because he gave me this sort of freedom that I never like thought about before. Just things I never experienced. Oh, it's interesting and fun for me to play guitar because I wasn't parroting other songs. It was like I can create and be free. So the joy that I've gotten from learning from Allan, and this is all unfortunate because he passed away. Because when he passed away, I said, if he did it, I want to do this. And it's also weird to think about, like, if he didn't pass away, I might not have gotten any better. It was the impetus for me to like, okay, I'm going to do this. And once I started to get it and enjoy playing, I said, you know what? There's probably other people that might be intimidated like how I was, or just didn't get it. So if I could do these videos and explain to them, maybe they'll appreciate it more. And that's the thank you to Allan. Like, hey, I can't thank you in person. So like, this is the closest that I can get to say, like, for helping me out, I'll see if I can help out a bunch of other people. And a lot of people have been very complimentary. And I feel like if I did it to one person, I accomplished that goal. And I feel like I have, because I've gotten a couple of people that have told me that. So everything else is just a bonus at this point. I guess that's kind of my mission statement.
What's very interesting to me is I think nobody from a schooled music background or a jazz background could have done it, because they would have brought too much prejudice to it. The jazz community, I think, they don't know what to make of Allan. And they would approach it in terms of their view of how to improvise.
I see.
I've had arguments with people where, you know, people say, well, he's like the guitar Coltrane. And I go, he's massively influenced by Coltrane, but he's not doing what Coltrane does at all, because it diminishes what Allan does, because there's all these other things in there. And part of it is the heavy metal bit of it, you know, it's the lead guitar. And sometimes especially on the earlier albums like Metal Fatigue, you know, that there is a heavy metal thing in there as much as there's a jazz thing and there's a modern classical thing. So that's I think that's really interesting that you've done this, because it's almost like you've come at it with a completely blank canvas. You've just gone, well, what's he up to? You know, I don't know what
Yeah.
he's up to. Right?
And,
Coming in with the chord, you know, the Berkeley chord scale approach, you know.
yeah. And that's like, and I say in the video, I can't tell you if I'm right. I can only go by what I've seen and my hypothesis. And I've said in the video, and it's 5.5 hours, so, you know, I'm sure a lot of people who've been watched it might not have seen this part of it. I had a friend of mine, Dave Parker, come over. I told the story in the video, and he ended up going to, you know, school for jazz and stuff, and I met him years later. And now I'm in the Jason Becker Shred kind of thing, where it's, you know, if an E minor chord, you play an E minor arpeggio and an E minor scale, da 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 da, and was always baffled by playing outside. And he just said, "Oh, you're just thinking too much," and I didn't get it. Now I get it, because I realize, for me, how I think Allan thinks is just in broader terms, where it's just like you're just creating tension and releasing and doing this stuff. But I have a friend of mine, my friend Brett Stein, who has a different approach, and it's not wrong. He thinks Allan's maybe thinking of more scales, like for the outside stuff, that he's using the Messiaen 4 mode and stuff like that. Now, to me, personally, that's more intimidating, because I don't know them and I don't know how to use them. But if I think of, well, if I just sort of create tension and release it, it makes it more acceptable for me to try to use. And maybe it doesn't sound as good as if you knew how to use those other scales, but I feel with experience you'll get it. So for me, it's more like, this is just how I think what goes, and what makes, like, I'm not trying to prove that I'm right. Mm-hmm. I just want to find out what I think he's doing and what makes sense to me. It's funny, I was just talking about this once again about Kurt Cobain, the whole, like, was he murdered, or you know, did he commit suicide? And there's a guy, Tom Grant, that's been spearheading, well, he had to have been murdered. But I think the problem is that he's trying to prove that he's right, instead of proving, of just getting to the bottom of it. So he's not willing to accept that Allan might have, that Kurt might have committed suicide. He's just saying, well, he had to be murdered, and he's trying to find. For me, I'm just like, I'm open to anything, and I can't tell you, yeah, he's just using shapes to play outside, and maybe he came, you know, I don't, or maybe he's using all these different scales. I just don't know. But with all the research, this is what makes sense to me, and I think that approach is really important, because I'm not trying to, like, I can't describe it properly. Like, I don't have some agenda to say, like, well, this is it because I found it through this. It's like, this is what I think is going on. I have all these examples that make sense to me, and if they make sense to you, that's great. But I can't tell you if that's actually what's going on. I think that's really important. People, I think, try to prove that they're right, instead of just like, I just want to get to the bottom of it, whether I'm right or wrong. I just want to know. And I do that with my videos. I'll do a video, and if I got something wrong in it, I'll try to update it and be like, I missed this, stupid me. Thank you to my friends, you know, that pointed this out, because I just want the right answer. I don't have to be like, well, I heard it this way, you know. And I think sometimes with jazz guys, from what I've heard, that guy Eric Woolman, when I started to learn a couple of Allan's tunes, I said, you know, I noticed a couple of chords that are like similar. This is kind of interesting, and I might want to do these lesson videos and stuff and show people. And he goes, you know, be careful, because they can be very, like, almost territorial in a way, and you know, they, you know, you might have a lot of negative feedback. And I went, well, I'm just going to do it anyway, because I feel that the information is important. So whether they agree or disagree, and I've been very fortunate that I've had very, very, if not almost, if there's been criticism, I haven't seen it. You know, you'll get like the weird commenter person, like someone said, oh, my arms are very hairy. I was like, what does it have to do with, you know, what I'm talking about? But it didn't stop me, you know, but I also am aware enough to know that I could be wrong. This is just my approach. And if you want to think of it in another way, that's okay too. But I mean, I just feel like my case is stronger because no one's put in the work that I have.
Well, this is why I got in contact with you, because I've been watching some of your videos. I've been, you know, watching you talking about certain solos, and then suddenly you come out with this 5.5 hour analysis, and it's really thorough. It's not just 5.5 hours because it's long. I could see you'd systematically gone through every single thing, right down to all the different scales, chords, the diatonic approaches, his approach to outside playing, his use of like different tunings. It was thorough. And when I clicked on it, I think it had about 40 views, and I knew this was going to be huge. And I thought, this is a really important thing for music education. This is going to go down in history. We're going to be referring back to this real achievement. So I thought, I've got to chat to this guy, because if he's gone through this, he's going to have an idea of what Allan was doing fundamentally, which is what I want to talk about on this video, what you think. And I'm really glad you prefaced that, with what you think, because that's all you can do. That's all you can do. And in the end, it's only fun. We're going to do this because it's fun to talk about it. The link to the big video will be down below for those of you who haven't seen it. You'll need provisions before you jump in. And
well, I tell people, like, download it. It's like, I didn't expect, when I first did it, I was figuring out these little patterns. I said, okay, I'm going to find all these little things, and I'm putting it together, but I had no idea how long it was going to be. Then once I started to write my little script, it's really, it was like a guideline. I wrote what I wanted to say, but I'll look at the 2 sentences, and I couldn't remember what it was. So I still had to, say what I wanted to say off of it. But it was 42 pages, and I got about 8 pages in, and it took like 2 hours to record. I'm going, this is not going to be good. This is going to be long. So as I'm editing it, I'm going, you know what? I'm just throwing anything in there, because if you're sticking with it, I might as well put everything in just one little part. And after I got it, I said, download it, take your time with it. You know what I mean? You don't have to, I didn't put it out so I could, make a ton of money from views or whatnot.
I did it in 2 sittings.
Yeah, which is impressive. Like, I haven't watched the whole thing. I had to a little bit, but
it's overwhelming. And I couldn't take in the little details of the harmony and this. What impressed me was suddenly going, my God, what seems like Allan Holdsworth is incredible. And when you put him on, it is just this overwhelming thing. But you'd actually looked at so much, you start to say, but there's patterns here, and he does this here. And when this is going on, this tends to happen. And I was impressed at how creative what Allan was doing. There is patterns there, and he is using shapes and not cliches, but he's got his licks. But when you were showing what they were, I was going, but that's a very creative lick. That's what impressed me. How many views are you on at the moment?
Maybe 140,000.
It's incredible that interest is there.
Yeah, well, I think some of it, everything I do myself. But I have a lot of help from people. Like, I like to ask, like in the video, that's what I was saying before, where I feel like almost like I'm not good enough to be in this kind of like circle, because there's so many other musicians that I met that are so great.
You can't think like, I
know it's just how I am. But like,
I'm a pro musician. I played for 40 years. I played in all sorts. I played with famous people, and I think we all have imposter. I'm self-taught, and then I've played in a lot sort of the progressive and a little bit in the future, but more in the progressive world, and I've done clinics and masterclasses and all that. So, and I think everybody feels like that, when you get into it. And of course, the biggest guy for this was Allan Holdsworth.
Yeah.
He probably couldn't read the transcriptions that you've
done. That's why a lot of these things made me feel good, because it felt like I was taking the same path that Allan almost was. But I'm surrounded by all these great musicians, like I mentioned, my friend Andre or Livio, or my friend Joe Britton, who like discovered all the tunings and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is great. You figured it out. I didn't want to take credit for it. I told him, because this video took me a long time to do, that I was transcribing stuff. And I said, dude, you figured this out. Like, release a video. Take the credit for it. I want to talk about it. But like, I want you to get the credit. And that's what I mean. I'm surrounded by all these like great musicians, where it's almost like, I feel like I don't know as much. I don't know what they know. So I don't know if what I'm doing is special, because it just seems like, well, this is new to me, but I can't tell if it's new to everybody else, because I didn't go to music school. You know what I mean? I don't know what they know. I don't know what the norm is. So when people said, oh, this is like a PhD, master, whatever, and I'm like, that's great, but I never went to music school. I've never taken a music class in my life. I took guitar lessons for like 3 years, and that's it. So I don't know what I did with some sort of dissertation or whatever, because to me it's just like, well, I have to go through it. But what I was saying before is I asked people certain things, and the guitar player. So Two Ridges, by the way, a lot of people think that's like my name, and it's not. It's the band that I'm in. Mm. And me and Greg are the two guitar players. He's the main singer-songwriter. And, you know, we spend so much, we're big Megadeth fans. So we'll spend like, you know, hours analyzing a solo and trying to get the fingering just right and all this stuff. I said, you know, if we put all this work in and we take it seriously, we should like put these things up, you know, on our channel. People could, you know, watch them. So, but when I was doing this video, I asked him about what he thought about it. I was like, well, I think if I, you know, it's going to be long. I said, well, just do it in chunks. And I said, well, I don't want to do it in chunks because I reference things later. So I think if I do it in 5 hours, at least it's all there, whatever. He texted me that he was wrong. He's glad that he was wrong because he went over in Europe to tour. But I think part of it is like the views is just the wow factor. I don't know how much of it is the content. It's just like, what is this? You know, you see it's 5 hours, and I hate making clickbait stuff. I had to make it a little clickbaity, not so much to get views, but I wanted somebody to see how much work I put into it. That's why I wrote like 950 examples, you know, all those numbers. It's sort of like all those numbers that are in the thumbnail, that's what's in the video. I have all that stuff in there.
Well, it just shows the work you've done. I'm really going to get deep down in now. I think now we've got to this point, I'm going to really start asking the questions that I want. So
sure.
Before we kick off, did you ever meet Allan?
No. So that day, it's fun. I remember certain things really well. And it's funny, if you notice, the day that I released the video was April 8th, which was a Friday, which is the same day Kurt's body was found, because I remember where I was that day. And the day that I saw Allan, I still remember, it was May 1st, 2009 at the Huntington IMAC Theater. And I had worked on that Friday, and I had to leave early. I usually take the late shifts, but I had to work early and then leave earlier. So I didn't eat lunch. And I get a lot of sinus headaches and stuff. And while I was going there, I started to get a headache. And I saw him play, and it was, I don't know, an hour and a half. And as he's playing, I'm getting a worse and worse and worse headache. But I'm like, I'm here. This is the guy that I want to see. I feel so terrible, but I want to be here for it. Then the show was over, and we went into the lobby. And I remember, I still in my mind's eye, I can see him. He's like maybe 20 feet away. And I'm saying, you know, I want to talk to this guy because I want to know what's in his head. But at the same time, not only do I feel terrible, but I don't know anything about his music. I'd feel so like I knew Protocosmos from the REH video, but I was like, I feel so weird that I want to talk to him, but I don't know anything about his music. I would feel like a poser in a way. So I said, I begrudgingly left. Like I wanted to stay, but I didn't. So I still remember it. And then I missed all of his New York shows for whatever reason. I didn't hear Allan. I played in 2014. Like, how did I miss all of this? Then Greg, who I talked about before, went to NAMM in 2017. And he asked me to go, and I said, I don't want to go. I'm going to be sick with all these guitar players. Like I said, I wasn't in that good frame of mind. And then I saw Allan was going to be there with Frank Gambale, who also I love. And I said, dude, Frank and Allan are going to be there. Like, get an autograph for me. And he never did. So I said, well, I'll see Allan. He's going to be playing at the Iridium in July. So that's what I mean. It's always just like,
yeah. I saw him in London on the Secrets tour.
Awesome. Was it 89?
That was probably around about 98, 99 when I first saw him, and then I saw him again in the early.
That probably means 16 Men of Tame. Secrets came out late 80s, 89.
1988, 89.
Okay. Did you say? I thought I heard 98, 99.
Tour. And then I saw him at early 90s on Journey was just up the road from me, and I took a student of mine who was a huge Allan Holdsworth fan, and then after the gig, we were stood at the bar, and Allan just walked up to the bar. So we just went up and said hi, and I just chatted to him. And of course, he did his usual thing of saying, "I'm sorry I played so bad." And we went, "You were brilliant." "No, I wasn't. I'm sorry I put you all through that." You know, and that was all the conversation was. But we had a reasonable conversation. So I'm glad I can say I met him and chatted to him. But I think this is part of the mystery, is that, you know, when you read interviews with him, the way he talks, he never really gives anything away, does he? I think he's quite guarded. You know, it explains his principles to some extent.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I did another interview last week. So weird to say that, 'cause I'm not some, you know, extraordinary person. So, you know, these are always weird. But I was talking to somebody, and he mentioned that. And for me, I felt like maybe one of the reasons why Allan was down so much on his. So before that, when I was talking to Joe and those guys, I kept reiterating, I feel really weird putting out this video because I don't want to diminish Allan's legacy to people. You know what I mean? I don't want you're here and Allan's here. I don't want this. I want you to come here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know if people are going to get upset by this, because there's so many patterns and all these kind of things. And I said, you know, once I started to realize this, so maybe was Allan really down on his playing because he felt he was relying on these shapes and ideas. Like the stuff that he did in the early 80s is really free improvisation, where it's not so pattern based. And if you watch my video, there's not a lot of lines from like the early stuff, but most of it is from like the late 80s, especially to the end. So is he down because he relied on these patterns so much and he wasn't freely improvising? Or like, this is what he did, why would he give it away to everybody? Like, his instructional video is awful because he doesn't give you any information. He gives you good information.
I've spoken to a number of people who knew him and I like guys that were in the band with him, you know. And the one thing I've picked up is that, which is very interesting, is Allan was aware of how incredible he was. And I think to navigate through life, it was easier to go, "Oh, I'm sorry I played so bad," rather than to have the conversation that everybody you met wanted to have, which was like, "You're the greatest guitarist in the world." And then how do you deal with that? You go, "Yeah, I know I am." Or say, "Well, no, I'm not." And he chose to say, "Well, no, I'm not." And
yeah,
start off by going, "I had a terrible gig. Sorry, I'm so," you know, because it offsets that thing of.
It's hard because also, like, even if I met him today, I don't think I could ask him anything because I would know the answer. Either I actually would know the answer, or I'd know what he was going to say. So then what's the point? You know, I can't say, "Well, what are you doing here?" You wouldn't tell me. You know, I put a thing in the video where someone says about the spokes solo, like, "You did all this crazy stuff. We're using these altered tunings," and he goes, "No," but he was. He just wasn't. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't being completely forthright, and I can't tell why. And once again, I've also talked to people that knew Allan, and it's also interesting because, you know, when I see him, he seems like this very humble, you know, nice kind of guy. But I heard things that may put him into perspective a little bit. I don't want to talk out of school, you know, and it's not like I want to be Allan. I just wanted his idea of music so I can take it for myself. But it seemed like he was a complicated person, and it's hard to say, like, for the way that he grew up, if some of the way that he felt and what he did with himself was because of some deep-rooted sadness, and he did feel really bad. Like, I've heard stories where it was like, "Hey, I wish he didn't make this kind of decision," whereas, like, me, I'm kind of in the same boat where I don't think I did anything special, but I also know when, like, it's stupid to say no. You know, like, "Oh, I would have taken this opportunity. I would have done that." So I always respect Allan's integrity to music, but there's a point where it's like, you need to provide for your family. So you should probably take that route and just sort of, you know. But I still can't figure out, like, I'm sure he was proud of what he did because he worked hard for it. And that's one of the things, what I was trying to do in the video. It's not that they're licks. They're like subsets of shapes within a larger shape. So, like, here's this scale, and here's a way that you can see this subset of a finger pattern within that scale, and then you can improvise with it. Why would he give that away in his instructional video? Because in his video, he says, like, he gives you the right information, but it's like, if I say, "Well, John, how do I play guitar like Allan?" learn the C major scale in every position on the neck. That one sentence that I said is not exciting, but it's like good information, and it could take you like 10 years to do with like where you're not thinking. So like that's the kind of information he gives in his instructional video, but that's not good enough for somebody that wants the detail. Is it because he didn't want to give that information away? He didn't go, oh well, if I'm thinking in melodic minor, I like to do this a lot, or if I'm like in the diminished scale, I do this a lot. You know what I mean? Did he not want people to sound like him? Did he want people to do that on their own and find their own little pattern? And that's what I try to do in the video, but using him as an example to say, look at this pattern. These are the things that he did, but you can alter it. Like I did with my chord book. These are the chords that I saw Allan use. But this shape that he used for major 7, he doesn't use in minor 7 or dominant 7. So maybe you can take that interval stack, make it your own, and come up with your own interesting voicings. Look at this way that Allan views the neck. Maybe you can take that and do it your own way and come up with your own patterns and your own phrases, so you can get the same kind of result, but you don't have to mimic him. You can just mimic his idea. And that's what I found very attractive. And that's what I wanted to talk about in the video. But like I said, I would never have done this video if Allan was alive, because it's like, I'm also big into wrestling, the old school wrestling. And I appreciate watching wrestling in the 70s and 80s when people believed that it was real. Even though it was predetermined in the ring, the people in the audience thought it was real. And the whole beauty of wrestling is the psychology, it's the crowd psychology, how the wrestlers manipulate the audience emotions to feel. But then it came to a certain point where everyone knew that, oh, they're supposed to do this. And that magic is kind of lost. I didn't want to do that in the video, to be like, these are all of Allan's tricks, especially if he was alive, because then it's just like I would expose him in a way like, oh, this is how we saw on the Lady in Half. So now you don't have to, now you can, do whatever it is that you want. It would almost be disrespectful. But I feel that now that he's gone, that information is too valuable. And I think other people could benefit from it. Maybe one thing if he wanted to do his own instructional video, but I felt like if I had the knowledge to do it, I should do it, and I should try to help people to do that way. And luckily, no one has said that like they thought less of Allan. And so I'm really glad that you said that before, that it almost made him seem better. I wanted to humanize him in a way and say, well, he is human, but that doesn't mean his ability gets lower. I want you to feel that what you're doing isn't as bad as what Allan's doing, and bring you up as a player. Does that make sense?
Well, the thing is, I think it's because you said a load there. I was listening to a podcast about Tony Williams this morning, and someone said that there's a recording of a clinic he did where he came out and he played like Max Roach, then he played like Art Blakey, and then he played like Elvin Jones. And it was quite apparent that this guy had learned to play like these people. Okay. And the reason why he had learned to play like that is because he then wanted to know how to play like himself and create his own sound. I think that generation of musicians, it was almost like insulting to copy somebody else. So I don't think Allan wanted, well, we know Allan didn't want people to copy him. He wanted to make his statement, which had come out of all these different things that he'd experienced. And that is possibly why he kept the mystery there, because he didn't like clones. I can remember the first interview I ever read with him when I was a kid, he was just moaning about clones and he couldn't see the point of it.
Yeah. And it's also easy. It's also easy for him because like he created that. He started playing guitar when the electric guitar was around for like 10 years. As time goes on, it gets harder and harder for people to kind of like find that thing. So, but what you were saying about Tony Williams is like, taking what someone else has done and then learning from it. I agree with that. And I say in the video, I think I said in the video, like, I'd rather there be more Allan clones out there because, his playing is more interesting because like guys like Chuck Berry, 99% of guitar players, maybe that's too much, but like most average guitar players sound like those old blues guys from the 50s. It's just that it doesn't, oh, you sound like Chuck Berry. It's just what they've played has permeated guitar so much. That's what it is to play a guitar. When those lines and stuff had to come from somewhere. So, but also wasn't in Allan's financial interest to have people to sort of clone him. So I get it from his perspective. But, I am always a fan of just let people play how they want to play,
I think the other thing that I think with Allan, that he seemed to have turned down incredible offers that would have done his career done really well, you know, going back to the Eddie Van Halen thing with Road Games, and I think Michael Brecker at one point offered for him to play with him, which would have put on a certain. He turned all this down, and Michael Brecker was one of his heroes, but he still turned him down, you know. So he seems to have had a very definite idea of what he was trying to create. And I think when you're it's a difference between copying and being an innovator. I think true innovators, they're in their own world, and on what they're trying to do is unbelievably difficult. So I think there's certain ground rules that you have to have when you're operating in that world. It's not you're dead and gone, and then people can look back at the whole thing. Because if Allan was alive now, there would be a future for him, and he would want to pioneer new stuff, wouldn't he? And so, you know, why would you want to be saying what you did 10 years ago when you were possibly interested in taking it to other areas? So
that's why I say in the video, genius, what the hell, a talent can hit a target that no one can hit, but genius can hit a target that no one can see. You know, and it's kind of like that, and that's why, like, I said, like, oh, I guess I'm no genius, but, you know, like, but I want to take what they did and sort of learn from it. But it's hard when you're that person, because it's like, and also, like, with Allan, people would ask him what he does. He's like, I just don't know what I do. Part of it is because it's so natural. It's just sort of a part of it. He's like, oh, well, if I'm hearing F major 7, I'm doing, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just steeped into what he's playing, that he's thinking less and not as much as you think. And in doing that, it's almost harder to tell people what is it you're doing.
This is fundamentally what I wanted to talk to you about. So I think we're there now. We really are there. And you naturally get to that point now. Is I believe that all the work that musicians do, and all the incredible work that Allan Holdsworth does, pick, you know, this big telephone directory of scales and going through all the permutations and all the stuff that he did, what musicians are really aiming to do is to be able to sing the tunes in their head. And I say to my students, I said, if you can get to the point where you can sing what you hear in your head, you don't need notes, you don't need scales, you don't need the names of notes or arpeggios, you don't need anything. If you can hear the lines in your head, but to get to that point, you need to become so ingrained in those patterns that you can utilize them unconscious. Now, did you feel that looking at his solos? Did you start to feel that he wasn't consciously aware of these things, or did you feel like he was?
I feel like he was. Because it's like one of the things that I might want to do in the future, I might want to do for an analogy, is like dissect one of his solos with the chords, and then, like, if you know what my video is, you can sort of see the shapes or whatever. But I think the beauty of Allan's playing and what people overlook is just its simplicity in terms of, like, its approach. It's as complex as it can be, but the seed of it is so simple. You know, which is, I just think of one scale and how to play it everywhere on the neck, and I have this chord and it can belong to these different scales, and then when I get there, I just play whatever I want. You know, if I'm treating it as this or treating it, and it's simpler than that. And so what you were saying before about, like, singing and stuff and hearing it in your head, I think, you know, I can hear what I want to play at a slower thing, but I can't hear what it is, like, if I'm doing something really weird. So I took a lesson with somebody, and it was the only time I took, like, it wasn't like a real lesson, but I sat down, and the guy didn't do anything wrong, but because of my own, how I feel, it was terrible. It was a terrible lesson because I put so much more pressure on, because he's going, I'm hearing everything that I'm playing, even these weird outside things. And I'm going, I can't do that. I can't hear that stuff. So where I thought I was closer to where I wanted to be was actually much further. And that was more detrimental for me to want to play like that. That's why when I started to analyze the solos that Allan was doing, going like, oh, that's not too different from how I play. Let me look at the outside play. And that's what it started with. I wanted to learn how to do some of the outside stuff and going, oh, here's this interesting finger pattern, but it's not really part of a scale, you know? And I watched another video, and I used this as an example in my video. Allan's charts are very complicated, especially as time went on. So where he would have like an A and a B section, and the B section would be similar to the A section, but like two chords would be modulated up a minor third. You know, something would be different. And I saw a video. It's for the tune 0274, which its solo chart is pretty hefty. And there's a video of him, and he's playing, he's looking and reading the chart. And I'm saying to myself, if he's looking at the chart, he's going, okay, I'm playing F Dorian, then it goes to B flat Dorian, then G melodic minor. He's not hearing it in the same way. He's using the chart to know what scale to go to next. And then when he gets there, he can use his ear. That helped me out tremendously, because that made me go, oh, that's kind of what I do. So what I feel like I'm doing is that, and that's how I got better. I didn't get better because my ear got better or I understood the fingerboard better. I just removed those barriers of almost like self-doubt in a way, and because I needed visual proof. And when I would see Allan play on some of the more difficult, like on some of the simpler ones, like Letters of Marque, those are very internalized. He's been playing them for 25 years.
Yeah.
But something very difficult like 16 Men of Tame, he's looking at the chart. So he's going F melodic minor. Okay, I'm in this position. I use this shape here. Then it goes to A flat Dorian.
Yeah.
Or I'm right there. I use this pattern because I'm in this. And it's his superpower is being, and I say this in the video, being able to play in any key on any part of the neck instantaneously and being able to utilize those patterns where it seems so natural. So that's what I would want to get to. But when I'm watching him look at the video, it seems very pattern centric, because it's like when he's not thinking subconsciously, that's what he's doing. When he's playing more unconsciously because he's internalized the tune really well, then there's more freedom to it, because you're not thinking of where do I have to go to next to make the change. I have to go to B flat Dorian. I have to go to this. I have to go to that. It's harder to make those changes than when you just kind of have a general idea of what you're doing and you can play a little bit more freer. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I'm a, we're musicians, and I think that's how everybody plays. 50% of it is patterns, isn't it? And the patterns are just so ingrained in your hands that they come out. And I mean, I say to my students, I mean, I'm a drummer, but I play guitar as well a little bit, and I teach guitar. And I said, if you look at D minor chord on a chart, you want your hand in the same way as you would go to strum a D minor chord. You want your hand to go to some material that you can play, and I go, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you just instantaneously go there with that, rather than going right, so it's D minor, so it's that you need to go there straight away. I think the other thing here that never gets mentioned is how important rhythm is. I think rhythm's far more important than pitch, and you need to do the study to you have to do the study to understand the notes. But actually, rhythm's playing an even greater part. And I always felt with Allan that sometimes I feel that he would just take a shape and he would move it around the guitar, and that was quite arbitrary. But it was his rhythmical brilliance that enabled it to sound like it was out.
Interesting.
Do you agree with that?
I don't know, to be honest. And I'm not disagreeing and I'm not agreeing. It's just a matter of ignorance. It's possible, because I just have a different approach. To me, it's like these are just where the notes are on the guitar, and then you just play with it. And the improvising comes with jumbling the notes around, but also jumbling the rhythms around and how you want to play. Right, yeah. That's when I did my transcriptions, I had to make limitations. I had to not put in the chords, because that would take even more work, and everyone has their own analysis for it, and that would get into more arguments. The other is I couldn't do the rhythms, because that would just take longer. If I was to do everything like, it's actually a dotted quarter, then all this kind of stuff, I wasn't looking to make it accurate. That wasn't the point of the video. It was how he sees the neck. But a lot of times when he's playing fast, it's just like straight 16th notes, and it's like there is some rhythmic variation, but when he's playing fast, I don't think there's really too much. But it's hard to see, because it's hard to say, because it's really like if he's just cramming in these notes and he's playing a group of 5 and then a group of 6 and then back to a group of 5, is it just because of he's wanting to do that, or is it just how the notes fit within that shape? I can't really say. But I mean, I'll defer to you, because you've been playing much longer, and you know much more about rhythm than I do. I can't say. I was more concerned of like how does he think of the notes on the neck, and then how can I take that, use it for myself, and how I can show other people like, hey, you can do this. So I ignored rhythm, because to me that's personal, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's how you want to do it.
I'm as open-minded as you. I'm talking to you because I found Allan Holdsworth fascinating for so many years. I do think he's the greatest musician of the last 50 years. I think if he did never taken a solo and only played
the chords
guitar, I still think he would be one of the greatest guitarists in the world. I think what he did in terms of guitar design, what he did in terms of tone, what he did in terms of chords, composition,
and
it's that all that's as incredible as the
he's the world's most incredible self-taught musician.
Yeah.
And that's why I love musicians that are unique in some sort of way because they follow their own path. Kind of like what I'm doing, although I'm not putting myself there like Allan. It's like, I don't know any better. I'm just doing it this way, but it's more of an educational thing than playing on the instrument. But like, why does Allan play chords like that? Well, because his dad was a piano player and just, showed him these chords and he just had to work it. How did he play solos like that? Well, he's like, well, I don't know what anyone else does, so I'm just going to map out all the notes that I can and find out all the scales, and I'll pick the ones that work, and I'll just play, you know what I mean? And, well, I don't really want to play a guitar. I want to play a saxophone. How can I get my guitar to sound like, not like the guitar? And all these are like rhythm, like we were saying, we were talking about rhythm before. I want to say, like, he thinks of everything in one. So he's not thinking of like 7/8 to 3/4, whatever. It's just everything is just how long it needs to be. And I think his rhythm was very good. He could play in time, but he just thought about it in a simpler kind of approach. And that's where you really learn the most from these kind of people, because everything about what he did, the way he wrote the tunes, the way he played, was so himself. He wasn't trying to copy anybody, and that's very rare that happens. So that's why, like, for me, I know the traditional way, and I know his weird way. How can I bridge that gap to explain it sort of to other people and to say, like, well, these approaches are so unique, like with the chordal stuff, the biggest lesson I got from Allan that I love is who cares? Like, who says I can't play the chord like this, or I can't play this scale this way, or whatever it may be. And it happened like that with chords. The chord names come from tertiary harmony. Every third note, major 7, because you have a major third and a major 7 interval, and A minor 7 flat 5, and there's all those names. I was just talking about this to a student. The weird name that we give the chord helps you tell what notes are in it. But if I go to C major and I just play 5 random notes and I go, what's the name of that chord? Because we're so used to this traditional system, we're almost locked in. Say, well, it's got the major 7 is the root note, and then we have and it becomes more complicated than when I was just going, it's just part of C major. You know what I mean? And it's so much more of a simpler, direct approach that's more appealing to me than the more traditional way. But it's that kind of thinking that makes him so unique, because literally everything about his playing was, I don't know what anyone else is doing. This is just what I want to do. And it just so happens to be that it's different from what everyone else does. I just did not know any better. And that to me is exciting.
In jazz improvisation, everything's built from the chord, isn't it? So it's a chord fundamentally. And so you have the chord at the base, and then you go, well, that chord, you could play this scale over that chord. With Holdsworth, I always felt like the scale was coming first, and the scale he saw as not having a root as well in the same.
Yeah.
So it was as long as the guitar was long. So he didn't have that rooted thing. So he didn't really think modally either, which is the other way to improvise. He thought it's a pattern, and I can just pick colors out of that pattern.
Yes.
And I think that's his great.
Yes, but it's tough because since I know traditional music, that approach works for Allan's music very well, but it doesn't work for formal harmony, because there are avoid notes. There are notes that have, in Allan's music, and I talk about this again in the video, I feel that every note has the same weight to it, instead of it in a more traditional way where there's more of a palette of consonants. You got your chord tones, your color tones, your color tones that are not in a key, your avoid notes and your avoid notes that aren't in a key. That's like the spectrum. And if you want to play interesting, you just, how do I make a line sound good? We'll play more of the good notes and, sprinkle in some of the bad ones. It's like not that hard of an approach. But that weight of every note has equal value does not work in traditional jazz. And that's what makes it hard to bridge that gap. So like if you're doing a 2-5-1 and this and what, you have to say, okay, well, F will work for D minor 7 and it works for G7, but then when you get to C major 7, that F isn't going to work. But with Allan's music, it's just, this is a scale that I want to play. This is just a random chord, random 4 notes that I'm playing. And in my video, I use like a C major with an add 11. So the F, the avoid note, is already in there. So of course now every note has equal value. You know what I mean? And most of the chords that he plays already, even if it's a consonant chord like a major 7, there already is some tension in there because there's some flat 9. If you do a third inversion major 7, where now you have a B as your root and you have a C on top, you have a flat 9 interval. You know, it's like the chord already has tension that like you almost won't even hear the F in there because it almost doesn't sound like a major 7 anymore.
Well, I've always thought that music theory is just is names given to cliches.
Yeah, well,
that somebody's done something in the past, and if you want to copy what somebody did in the past, then you're going to have to understand it. So you're going to have to get the book out and go, what are they actually doing? Oh, they're doing this, and it's a cliche. And there's people who want to know that and understand that. And then there's people like Allan Holdsworth or Ornette Coleman or John Coltrane who are going, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And there's I have tried to listen to, read so many interviews by Holdsworth as well, and and I've spoken to other musicians and known him. And the one thing that really struck me is he was friends with the guy from that rock band. Was it Quiet Riot or what was the band? He played that funky music with him.
Yeah, Jeff Watson.
Yeah, Jeff Watson. And there's a long interview with Jeff Watson, and he said they went to a bar once, and Allan turns around to him and said, can you name all the bottles and all the drinks across the back of the bar? And he went, no. And he says, I can, because I've trained myself to do that. I've trained myself to recognize the patterns and be able to recall them. And then
I heard that from somebody, not that it was Jeff Watson, but I heard that he had a photo. I always get it wrong. It's a photographic memory.
Yeah.
And that makes sense if he's like, well, I just look at the charts because he's singing. He said in an interview, like, if I have to dial a phone number, I don't know the number offhand, but I kind of see it. And I think that very visual approach applies to how he plays, because you can see in my video, like, here's a pattern and it makes hand sense on the guitar because it's a simple, like, 3-note kind of thing moving up and down. It's visual, not harmonic. And the problem is, in the traditional jazz sense, there's more emphasis on harmony instead of like those kind of like interesting patterns where it's like, well, here's a chord, I'm playing C major, and then these are all the things that I can do in C major, instead of you have an altered dominant chord, you have to use the altered scale, you have to do this, and you have to get this and avoid that note, and there's more thinking involved in it. Whereas in Allan's music, there's less thinking, and I think that's why when people listen to it, it sounds so foreign. And part of it is also because like the chords and scales move around so fast, it's really hard for you to hear what's going on. And I stress that in the video. If you know the solo harmony really well, then his solos make so much more sense because you can hear the change. You can go like, okay, it goes to this chord, and then it's got and then it goes to melodic minor. Yep, there's the melodic minor line, and then it goes to the diminished. There's the diminished. You know what I mean? But you have to know what the bed is that he's playing over.
Yeah.
In a traditional jazz sense, you could almost just remove the melody, remove the harmony, and just listen to the melody and hear what the chord change should be. And it's a fascinating, different approach, and you can apply them to both, but you have to be aware. And I said that in the video, like, oh, this is the pattern that Allan would use that you can use here, but you might have to like watch out because, like I said, this part has the avoid note in it, and it's going to create too much tension unless you want that. The thing is, you want to make sure to, in functional harmony, use these tensions and know how to resolve them in a deliberate way. Whereas in Allan's approach, it didn't make a difference because everything just kind of worked over everything.
I've spoken a lot about this on my channel, and I think it's the people that don't really understand jazz history don't understand how this sort of conservatism in jazz crept in the early 80s when Wynton Marsalis emerged, and he was really influenced by Stanley Crouch, who was a jazz critic, and they really started to say this is the proper way of doing jazz. When you go back to Charlie Parker and you go back to Thelonious Monk, they're not, every one of them self-taught. Some of them are going to classical music college because that's all there is, like Miles Davis. But Miles Davis stood up very famously in one of the lessons and said, "You're a liar," to the teacher.
I love that you say that because, like I said, I'm ignorant to all that
Yeah,
stuff.
well, this is you know, when I do these interviews, I'm always trying to think where, you know, where we go, because I don't, you know, I'm talking to you and I haven't got a clue about this, but I'm starting to get a bit of a thesis up talking to you now. And what I think it is this, is I felt that the real jazz guys were ripping the rule book up. And they were
Yeah, and
so what Charlie Parker was doing was ripping the rule book up. Later on, the theorists come along and go, oh, he was playing these chord tones and he was leading in from a neighbor tone and coming in front and then below and all. And yeah, that's what he was doing. But he was creating that. He you know, he wasn't following a book of rules.
yes.
And then what happened with jazz was when the fusion guys came in, the fusion guys were being influenced like progressive rock, psychedelic rock. They were being influenced by like free jazz, where there's no rules at all. And I think the sort of jazz establishment reacted against that. And a sort of conservatism cropped into jazz, where people start to say, this is the proper way you do it. This is how you play jazz.
Interesting.
And that's been going for 40, 50 years, you know.
And I could believe that. I wanted to say two quick things about the Miles Davis thing. So the guitar that I use in my video, I got as a gift from a student. They're the Ross family. I love them. They're such great people. And the kid started from nothing, never playing. Then I got him to like play in front of his friends at like a thing, and everyone was really happy. And then eventually got him to Berkeley. I got him into Berkeley after he only played for like, I don't know, 5 years, never played an instrument before. And as I'm helping him with this, it's funny because I can't go to music school because I would be up there fighting with the professor. That's why when you said that with you're alive, I'd be like, that would be me. I would be like, why can't I do that? That's why in the video I said, where's the rule book? Who says I can't use it this way?
Well, the thing is, this is the interesting thing, is when Allan Holdsworth emerges, late 60s, he's progressing through the 70s. He actually is one of those musicians who is rewriting the book for jazz, but the jazz world forgot about him because that conservatism just couldn't take on board, you know, what he was doing. When I was very young, you see, I got into Charlie Parker and I'd sit with my guitar, but I'm like a heavy metal kid like you, so I'm trying to play like Charlie Parker, and all I was doing was listening and trying to play like it. And I got so I could play over bebop stuff, and I was happy with that. But then a jazz guy would probably come along and say, no, you're not doing it because you're not doing what this guy do. And they're not. Yeah. And I actually, when I confronted that, I rejected that a little bit. I was like, well, no, because I'm a heavy metaler and I'll do what I want. That was my thing, you know. With the drums, it was the same thing. I really got into Frank Zappa and the Mahavishnu. I was playing a lot of really odd time signatures, like in 19 and 21, and lots of polyrhythms. And in the jazz world, that just doesn't exist. If you start to do that, it's unbelievably difficult. The jazz world will just go, well, that's not jazz.
Yeah.
And I came across it a couple of times directly. You know?
And what's so fascinating, because like I said, I'm coming from the outside. I'm coming from this like a foreigner kind of aspect. Like, I don't know what's traditional and whatnot. I'm not even a big fan of punk. You know, Nirvana is punk or grunge music, but Kurt would always say, you know, punk rock is freedom. Jazz is freedom.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and that's what I never thought about it because I didn't know what jazz was. And I'm not saying that I know everything about jazz, but what I've come from an outsider's perspective to try to like enter this world a little bit is that you have a chart, you have these chords, and anyone can interpret it how they want. And when you improvise, you can improvise it over however you want.
That's exactly.
But you need a sandbox to work in, and that's freedom. It's a little bit more constrained because everyone needs to sort of know where they are. And I said, that's appealing to me. That to me is what jazz is. When you see, like, because like I said, I'm a metal guy, you know, when I'm seeing Marty Friedman, I want to see Marty Friedman play Tornado of Souls and nail it. But when you see Allan Holdsworth, you want to see Allan Holdsworth create. That's the freedom. You want to see how the musicians interpret the music at that time. And I'm like, I get what jazz is now. You need a little framework, but you're hearing the player create. And what you were saying before, one of the things I want to say, like what you said about the conservatories and stuff, when I came up with that add flat 6 scale first from Barry Harris's video. And I remember I remember Barry Harris was, I don't know much about him, but he would go to the schools, and he seems like a guy that the self-taught or like knows the things. It's like, this is how we used to do it. This is what they're telling you, but this is how we used to do it. And he was talking about the flat, and he was like, okay, C minor 7, how many different keys that get belonging to? And I went, oh, that's 3. And in a room of, classically trained musicians and stuff, they were just like, no one knew. And well, that's so easy. I think what you're trying to say is that the more of that kind of conservatism, telling people what jazz is, stifles the creativity.
That's what I feel, and I just wondered that this is why I felt your video was great, because throughout it you never veered off going, this is the way you do it.
No, I can't.
This is what I think Allan was doing it. These are shapes. It was almost like a bit like a sort of, how would you say,
cop out? It's a cop out in a way. No one can argue with me.
Well, it's like somebody once said to Frank Zappa, he said, is your stuff social commentary? And he said, no, it's nowhere near that complex. He said, this is like something's happened down the road, and then a guy drives past it, and then you stop the guy and say, what happened up the road? And he goes, I don't know, I was just driving down and this car came, and he said, that's all you can do is just report. I love to go into the detail. I loved your video, and I got loads from it, and it was almost like overwhelming.
Sorry.
Now and then there was just so much there. But the thing that impressed me was the diatonic stuff, because I wanted to go to the end and get into the outside and the Messiaen mode and all that sort of stuff. Now, because for me, when I discovered the Messiaen mode, I have never been able to use it ever. The reason I think is because I haven't got Allan's touch, because I alternate pick everything for a start, so it starts to sound very, and also I rhythmically I just couldn't make it work. This is my earlier point, which I think the rhythms are really important. Allan's his rhythms are very fluid, aren't they? It's not like the viola.
Yes,
rhythms are very fluid.
Yeah,
it allows him to almost just pour notes out.
I think that's easier when you're not alternate picking, because alternate picking is more, because I also alternate pick too, and I was so happy when I was done with the video, because I was a shred guy and I'm losing it because I'm doing so much stuff that's not that's like, well, I need to get back into training and doing, but you're more rigid with the rhythm, whereas when you're playing more legato and playing more left hand stuff, you don't have to worry about the notes that you're playing, and it's easier to play more freely rhythmically if you're not,
it's all more like that, isn't it? And I think it's a really interesting, I think it's an interesting area. Talking to you, I think it's just not possible to nail it. You can't actually you'll never know, like you said right at the top of the video, you've told me what you've learned, and is that you'll never know what Allan was really trying to do.
And that's why it's, how can I teach these things? I can only teach the things that are transmissible. I don't even know if I use that properly, but teachable. I can never tell you what he's saying. He's like, okay, I saw Allan use this pattern and it works within this scale, and this is him using it. I can never tell you, it's because he's thinking of, he's starting on the major 7, and maybe he is and maybe he isn't. I don't know. And what you were saying about the Messiaen mode, like I said, you come into figuring out this Allan stuff with all these preconceived notions, and like even in his interviews and stuff, and when I talked to Allan's friend Chip, I don't know when he started to do this, but Chip told me that Allan would give what they would call the 1,000-foot view, where he would purposely not tell you all the details. But I don't know if that was because of gear or whatnot, or if like he started doing that in like the mid 2000s. I don't know when it happened, but like when he says things, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what he's doing. The proof is in the pudding. That's why I had to look and turn over every rock and every solo, and I'm hitting everything because I'm passionate about this. You just don't know until you look at all the details. So with that Messiaen mode stuff, he talks, and I say in the video, Chip would talk to Allan, I have no idea who this Messiaen guy is that everyone's talking about. I used this scale. They found the same scale, but I'm
the same. I knew that scale, but I didn't know anything about Messiaen. I just saw it as whole tone with a
and that's why I put in the whole tone. Like, how is Allan thinking? I don't know. But with the Messiaen mode, When I started to analyze the solos, I found very little actual use of it, where I would say, well, that's definitely it. And if it is, it's usually scalar. And that's why I included those in the video. But then I have my friend Brett Stein, who he's writing this Messiaen etudes, like Messiaen 4, 5, you know, all of them. And they sound great. They sound like Allan, but they're diatonic to that mode.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to him. And my approach is, that's not wrong. That's totally feasible. But you can't tell if Allan said, well, I developed this because I was using the Messiaen mode and I found this pattern and it works with this and works with that. You'll never know. And even if you talk to him, even if he knew the answer, I don't know if he would tell you, or maybe he doesn't even know the answer. He tells you, I don't know where this came up with. So, like, that's why I said it's probably easier to think of them as, like, micro patterns that are strung into bigger ones, because it's like the part of the problem, again, for teaching is the overlap. Is it really this? Is it really that? Like I said, the diminished scale has six notes of melodic minor in it. So if you omit those two other notes, what scale am I playing? Well, of course, the harmony can also dictate it. But there are other scales that are like that, where it's like, is it A or is it B? And the same thing happens with chords. If I play an A minor 7 or I play a C6, what am I really thinking? Am I thinking of a first inversion A minor 7? Or am I thinking of a seventh inversion, you know, C6 with A minor?
Yeah.
You don't know. And ultimately, who cares? That's not
the
whole.
This is what I've got out of the interview, because I'm thinking so many times that where you're in a band and I've played some difficult music, and someone will say, how are you thinking about this? And I'll go, well, it's two 15s and then a 9 and then a 15, and they're going, oh, I just saw it all in 4/4, and then the guy says, I saw it as a 7, but you pushed it, and everybody in the band is playing exactly the same music, but actually seeing it in 4 different ways.
It's funny you mentioned that, because once again, I cultivate. I was talking to a student yesterday. We were doing Personal Jesus, Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
So I loaded up the song and I heard, you know, oh, it's an F sharp. But the beginning has 2 harmonics. There's a C sharp and an F sharp harmonic. And I went, okay, so that's kind of weird. Well, there's a C sharp on the 4th string, and so that could be it. And I said, oh, I want to watch video of it. And I watched a video of it, and you know what? The guy's guitar was tuned up a whole step. So doing the B and E string harmonic, when you're tuned up a whole step, is now C sharp and F sharp, and what he's playing is moved down. And it's just so weird. You never know unless you know, like, the music tells you half the story, but you need to go in deeper. So I would cultivate these interviews. I would want to see Allan play. And what I wanted to bring it to was Steve Hunt did an interview with Rick Beato.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And and he said that there was I forgot what it was, and he went to Gary Husband and said, how are you feeling this? And he goes, well, I'm feeling like that. He goes, well, I'm not feeling it that way. And if they tried to meet halfway, it didn't work. But if they felt it their own weird way, it worked for them, you know. And it's exactly what you were saying. People were interpreting it differently. And that's one, again, the beauty of what Allan would do. Is like, this is the chord. This is why when I did my chord book, I couldn't include the bass, because Allan would play the chord. I'm playing this chord. Boom. How would the drummer interpret it? Is he playing it in double time or half time or doing whatever? How is the bass player interpreting it? Is he playing F as the lowest note? Maybe he's playing a G sharp or doing something very different. He had this form. Here's the freedom of it. This is my chart. How do you interpret it? And the different people interpreting it different ways gives it a new element. That is, to me, the essence of what jazz is. It's that interpretiveness, how different musicians hear things, and sometimes you don't hear it the way that's intended. I love the Meshuggah song Combustion. Everything is on E and
Yeah.
But because of the snare, that sounds like the downbeat. It sounds like all the upbeats are because it's and you're going, when they're playing it, are they feeling it? Are they feeling it that way? Or are they just like, well, I'm just, as long as the notes line up with the downbeat, and then put in an extra, you know, shorten a measure here that lines up. You know what I mean?
One of the things I've done musically, I've really got into areas where you don't really know what the tempo is. I've really been fascinated by rhythmical illusions.
Okay.
Like optical illusion, but rhythmicals. And you'll hear it with dance music where a groove will kick in, and then when the beat kicks in, you realize you're on the wrong side of the beat. And
so not like a metric modulation. I know what you
mean.
Yeah,
and I'm into sort of metric modulations, all that type of stuff. Always been fascinated by that. And talking to you, the thing I've got from this interview is that the whole thing, beauty of music is we all see the world from our own viewpoint. And part of the thing with music is you get to learn how we're the same, and we get to learn how we're different. All art's like that. It's just checking out with other people. You know, do you see the world like that? Yeah, well, I see it like that. And you go, well, that's interesting because I see it like that, but also I don't see it. I see it different. And I think that's the whole thing, you know.
And the beauty of that.
There's one thing, you mentioned Frank Gambale. There's one thing I must say about Allan in this video, and I feel the same way about Sean Lane. I can remember Allan played up the road from my house, and I couldn't get to the gig, and I knew the guy that owned the venue, and I said, how did the Allan Holdsworth gig go? And he said, well, we only had 17 people in, right? And he then played in another venue, and I chatted to someone that was the same thing. So the whole time Allan was alive, I feel he was marginalized, he was ignored, that there should have been statues up for him, there should have been grants given into him to do his music, but he was completely ignored. As soon as he died, the whole thing changes. And I'm sure if he came back alive now and did a tour, he'd be selling out 2,000-seater venues. And I felt exactly the same thing happened with Sean Lane as well.
Yeah, but once again, it's like, you have to respond. And also, you don't know how much of that was from Allan's perspective. I did hear a story from somebody that knew Allan that was like, they offered him like, hey, you can do this and we'll pay for it and whatever. And then when you go on tour, and he didn't want to do that. I can never not respect, I use a double negative, I will always respect the man's integrity to his music and sacrifice the money for it, but it didn't always have to be that way. No, I felt it was almost like too much, and part of that is the music that he wrote. It's not music that people can just listen to and go, oh, I get. When I can always, it's easy for me because I can always remember a time where I didn't like it or didn't like something about it. One of my favorite albums is Flat Tire. And that's an album that no one likes, really. Mm. I remember when I was big into Allan, I mean, it's not that I'm not, but like, I get all of them, but I don't get that one. It took a while. Complex music, the new Meshuggah. Mm. I love Meshuggah. They released a new album, and I listened to it immediately, and I loved it. But I'm part of the little Meshuggah group, and people go, I listened to it once, I don't know how I feel about it. And then like a week later, they go like, oh, you know what? I changed my mind. I really like it. This is dense music. When you listen to dense, complicated music, you can't just listen to it once and go, okay, I've made my decision. The more you hear it, the more you understand, oh, now I get the rhythm that's going on. Now I get the harmonic change. You appreciate it more and you can understand it. Then you can make your decision whether you like it or you don't. And there's I think Van Gogh, someone made this quote. I love these quotes. It was like, art has to be understood in order for it to be loved or hated or something like that. And I feel that's true. And with Allan's music, yeah, you have to really understand it. And the average person can't. And that's not the fault of the average person because the music is dense. You know, I told you when I got into Allan from my friend Eric, who said, oh, Allan solo's very diatonically. I was already playing guitar for 20 years. I already was a Meshuggah fan. I already knew all this weird stuff. And it still wasn't connecting.
But I teach music. I'm a head of music in a music college. They're all 16 years old and they all come in, and at some point I have all the guitarists, and I always enjoy at the beginning of the term, and I've got all those guitarists in the room to go, well, who do you think the greatest guitarist is in the world? You know, and they all start talking about it. We have a conversation. They say, who do you think it is? I said, I think it's Allan Holdsworth, which I don't actually. I think Charlie Christian was probably the greatest guitarist in terms of influence, and I think there's a guitarist called Lenny Breau. Unbelievable. I think he's I
actually give it to Ted Green.
Ted Green's another phenomenal. So it's a bit of a joke, but it's a way to get the kids engaged. And I play them Devil Take the Hindmost, and I always put that track on. And I know that 90% of the guitarists in that room don't get it, but the thing is, there's one kid that does. And for that kid, their life has just been completely changed. And they come back, what was that? What, you know, and I've had kids come up to me afterwards and said, you know, my life changed when I went to college and you played
that's awesome.
That day. Yeah. So that's the effect he has, you know.
That's what I try to do with my videos.
I think You know,
Yeah.
I think we're coming up to nearly an hour and a half here.
Oh, is it? Oh, I haven't even paid attention. I love this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's what I try to do with my
I'd
video.
love to get you back, so let's not use it all up. I'd love to have you
Oh, okay. No, that's
back to
fine
do
with me.
stuff as we go on. So I think we've I mean, you've transcribed every solo. I've been listening to him for 30 years, you know, and we just spoke for an hour and a half, and I just don't feel like we've even scratched the surface of what really made that guy tick.
Yeah. Well,
that's the
because
conclusion.
but that's what made him tick was so simple, because it's just it's the simplicity of it.
Yeah.
It's just done in such a complicated way, and all the layers on top of it. But the genesis of it, like I said, the germ of it is really simple, and that's why I was like, it's hard to teach that, because you have to say this is what's being done and that's it. But you can't. You have to like let that go and say they can't be any rules. There just has to be this, you know, freedom to it, and that's what's hard to teach. I can't teach people how to, you know, come up with this stuff on their own. I can just use Allan as a conduit, as these are these examples, and you can come up with your own thing. And I think that's what makes it so hard, is that it is very personal. Like, how does it does rhythm? I don't know, whatever he wants to do, and that's unteachable. But what I was trying to say before with my videos is, like, I hope in my videos people can understand the tune better, can appreciate it and enjoy it more. And I feel that that's very important, because it's not easy music to listen to, and I get it. But you can take, if you understand those approaches, you can take that and put it into your own playing, because it doesn't have to be complicated that way. You can do it in a simpler way. You know, like for my band, we play complicated. My band stuff is way more complicated than Allan's stuff. But I can take those elements and go, okay, if I have to play G minor add 9, I can like play all these different chords, or if I have this area to improvise, I can do this kind of stuff. But there are sections where I have to play what's on the page, because then it wouldn't work. So I don't do a lot of writing, but my band stuff sounds nothing like Allan. But you can go, oh, he got that from him. Oh, he took that from him. You know, you wouldn't go like, oh, this is a carbon copy. And I think that's important. Take the ideas of the man.
Yeah, it's just there for someone to take and make into their own thing. And I think what you've done with that video is there is an absolute ton of stuff for musicians to take. And I watched it all the way through. Then the next day, I would just randomly click in and just see what you were saying at that time, and then think, well, what was he talking about there? Because every single idea that you put forth that Allan has offered up, you could just expand out into a million things, couldn't you? You could make a whole career out
I couldn't.
Right, it does come down to a really simple concept. And I've had this idea as a music teacher. I've thought, how could I teach harmony? And the one breakthrough that I had with harmony was realizing that people have to hear it. They have to hear it. So I used to teach harmony, go like, here's C major scale, and there's C and G, that's about, and of course they don't hear it. And you might play it, but it doesn't make sense to them. And I thought, if I've got 12 people in the class, I could give them all a note. They could all have a bell or something that is one of those 12 notes. So if you write it on the board, I could go, right, so here is the C major scale. So who's C? Let's hear C. And then they would all become involved with this very simple concept that there's basically 12 notes and you can mix them up how you want.
Yeah.
I think that's in simplicity is what HOLDSWORTH.
Yes. Yeah, that's like I get to the point where if I ever get any better and I become you know, some sort of improv guy, what scale use? I have to say the chromatic scale.
Yeah,
because everything you want is just subsets of it, you know. And I think it depends on the person. They tend to overcomplicate things. I used to as well, until I had to do the proof for myself. Like, oh, it's not as complicated as I thought. It's like in funnels, that middle part that I was always like, that must be the hardest part to play. That part's the easiest part to play, because there's so much tension, but it's like your freedom to do whatever. It's harder to just follow the changes there.
Yeah.
And like, it just, you know, it switched what I thought was difficult in a different way. And the less I have to think, the more of just personal freedom of playing makes it so much easier to not only attain, but, you know, like I said, with the outside playing stuff, you know, say if I have to play an E minor, well, how do I play outside? Well, you know, just play some random notes and just know where you're trying to go to. It's much simpler than just like the over analysis. You have to do it like this and do it like that and do it like that. And I don't think that will never get done. And I think that's, like I said, the problem. Like with Allan's stuff, the video was so long, I don't think any part of it is really complicated.
Yeah.
It's just there's a lot of it. There's a lot of small things that add up.
A very simple concept. It's like saying, you know, there's a set of numbers. So what are the variations of those numbers? Oh, a billion variations. And Alan's really got his head around the variations of that simple concept, which is I think is basically scalar. It's pattern. Well, it's not even scalar. It's pattern.
Yeah, and a lot of it's visual to the guitar because it's the symmetry of how those notes. That's why if you looked at some of these lines in standard notation, you'd never be able to find the rhythm. But once you put it on the fingers of the guitar, you go, oh, there's no notational pattern, but there's a physical pattern. There's something going on. Like there's times where like he'll play some sort of hand pattern, but as he gets higher, his hand widens out. So like you'll notice there's a finger pattern that he's doing, 2 strings and then the other string over. But he's moving and he's whitening out his fingers. So obviously those notes are not important because it's not to a scale. He's just creating this chaos of notes that he's going to resolve later. And it's, oh, that's really easy. So like if you try to do and analyze every note, it's going to be really difficult instead of just saying 2 measures of creating tension because it resolves to this. You know what I mean? And I think people sometimes can't let that go in a way. Or other people are different. If they feel like they need to analyze all those notes, I'm not the one to tell them that what they're doing is wrong. And again, like we were saying before with the conservatory stuff, to think you have all the answers is very egotistical. You know, I did the work, I have my case, I feel like I'm confident with it, but there's no way to know. I'm also a big JFK buff, the assassination. I think it was Lee Harvey Oswald. I used to be a conspiracy guy, but this is where my mind was open. I wanted to hear both sides. And I realized one side left out some of the things that the other side would talk. I go, yeah, this makes more sense. But I was open to just like, I want to know what I think is right. But at the same time, there's nothing there to say that's the way that it is.
The only thing I differ from you is I think Alan could hear it. I do. I think he could hear it as well. The reason I say that is because I've worked with so many musicians, and I've worked with musicians that can hear everything. I've worked with musicians, and I know that Alan didn't have perfect pitch.
Yeah.
But there's degrees of relative pitch, and
which I have too. But I think what I was concerned about was you hear the note and then you play it right here. I think what Alan might have done, he's heard the note and then can hear right after where he wants to go to it. To hear the note,
directing where his fingers want to go, and he's also got patterns here, and you've got your ear here, and your ear goes, I'm going to go to there. You know, I can hear that minor third up. You're not even thinking consciously like that, but you know, I'm going up to minor third. Then when you go there, you recognize the pattern, and so the two things are working together.
Yes, and he says that. I put that in his interview. He's like, well, it's some of it's visual, some of it's by ear, and I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
My like freak out was that I had to hear the note the millisecond before I play it, and I'm going, my ear can't do that. Now that doesn't mean like a guy like George Benson, like if you could do that, God bless you. Like I might be able to do that eventually. I could do that at a surface level, at a very, you know, like I'm playing just in G minor, I can hear the intervals. But if it's like, now if I want to play weird outside stuff, my ear's not that developed to do that. And it's more scary because it's then like, it prevents you from wanting to try that stuff. But I think if you play and hear afterwards where you kind of want to guide to it, that's much more inviting and might help people try it more. And even for me, if I'm doing the weird outside stuff in my own playing, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think as you do it more, you become more experienced with how to use it, and then your ear develops afterwards. Whereas if you think of all the scales and how to use them, it makes it almost harder psychologically in a way, because you have to hear it, you have to do this, and it almost gatekeeps people out in an involuntary way from.
Yeah, I mean, part of the thing with my channel and my videos is I really want musicians to just stop worrying about perfectionism, stop worrying about what everyone says the way to do it, and just follow their hearts. If that's the fundamental message of my channel, is that, you know, listen to the music, love it, it's inspiring, and then go out and create music and not let anybody tell you what to do, you know. And I've had some run-ins with some really famous jazz musicians about this as well. I'm not going to say
I would like to hear that.
Yeah, but I have where I've just made this point that because I think that if jazz is going to survive, it needs to open the doors to all these other musicians out there. So somebody who's like a metal guitarist or a blues guitarist, they shouldn't feel shut out by jazz. They should feel like they should be able to get in there and go, what's my way in? Well, it's the blues, because the jazz is the blues. So get in there and play the blues. I'd rather hear someone play blues than play a bunch of random lines. You know,
if we're gonna dig into it a little bit deeper,
yeah.
honestly, it's probably psychological.
Yeah.
Some sort of like I'm attacking their ego in a way, because like I said with the Tom Grant thing with Kurt Cobain, he's looking to prove that Kurt was murdered. His ego is pinned on that because he spent 30 years trying to prove it, instead of him just being open-minded and saying, well, it could be this or that. And I think some people who are, I guess, like us, are just like, well, we don't know what the right answer is, but we're enjoying doing this thing. And then other people are like, well, this is the right music, and if you like Nirvana, then, you know, you're not as good of a musician. And there's a weird ego thing that's pinned to it, that's saying like, I'm good because I do this. And that's really the wrong. And because jazz is like the most evolved form of music, it's like, well, if you play the most evolved music, you are the best musician, and you will do all this stuff. And I think that's very unhealthy. It's also unhealthy to be like Allan, where it's like everything I did was bad, you know, or like deleting solos. Like I did this whole thing and I deleted. I think that's bad. You want to be in the middle. You have to be open-minded to say like, this is what my approach is, and that works for me. Oh, your approach is different. That works too. This is what I want to say before.
Well, I'll give you an actual example of this, and I'm going to say it in the video. I'm friends with a guitarist called Roy Marchbank.
Yes.
Roy Marchbank is an utter genius on the guitar. I've sat and watched him play, and I know he's the fastest guitarist in the world, but that's got nothing to do with it. It's like Holdsworth. His whole concept, everything's thought out. You know, the notes, the scales, the tone. He really is. And yet that guy's getting so much backlash all the time. And it's like, I'm thinking, why is he getting a backlash? It's because it's insecurity on the part of certain people in the audience, that they want him to be the fastest guitarist. They're so wound into it, but they can't accept that he is. And then I talk to him, and he's got no interest in playing the guitar fast. It's just an outcome of the aesthetic process he's been through, and it's such a shame. And this is why I mentioned about Allan dying, because I felt the same with Sean Lane. I felt the same with Allan Holdsworth when they were alive. I mean, I go back, you know, probably 35 years to listen to Allan Holdsworth, and I can remember I liked him, and everyone used to go, there's no emotion in that.
Yeah, well, that's why
no emotion in his stuff, and it's just random. And I don't know. His guitar tone's a bit metal, and these are the jazz people, and then the metal, like, oh, I don't get. And I think he had nobody on his side except for the hardcore fans. And then now, I know people who changed their tune when he died. Same thing with Sean Lane. And you mentioned Frank Gambale. It hasn't happened for Gambale. Gambale's a bloody genius.
Yeah, he helped me a lot, like, to get to this point about seeing modes and whatever, and then I was able to break away. But he's really the impetus to get me better. I think without that, I wouldn't have been able to dissect the Allan stuff, because I was sort of like in a rut. I think Frank Gambale, not only a great player, but also an excellent teacher.
He is. And also I feel that Gambale can do so much more than just sweep pick. It's like, I've heard him doing sort of country guitar playing and then blues guitar playing, and he's got such an incredible vision in all of that. And I don't know if you see the Rick Beato, and they said, can you do some alternate picking? And then he starts alternate picking. He's like, oh my God, you know. These types of musicians, the true innovators of our time, don't get the credit. They just don't get the credit they should, you know, in these musical world. You know,
what you were saying about Sean and Allan, it's like, I think, and even with Kurt, like, Kurt, what I love about Nirvana is that, like, I always said Allan and Kurt are cut from the same cloth. It's just they're on very different. Like, have you ever heard of a song that sounds like In Bloom?
Yeah.
You know, what's the functional harmony there? Because there is none, you know? And it's like an Allan tune where it's just like, it almost makes no harmonic sense. But I think for people that are very creative, there's almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like you have to give something up. And I think something that you give up is like how you are as a person. And that leads you to these, like, if you're very creative, it leads you to these like weird and not normal decisions. I mentioned another interview. I love this guitar player that I know, Eric Heffler. He's the best guitar player that I know personally. He's like Ted Green. His technique isn't as good physically, but he doesn't know any tune. He hears it in his head. So if you tell him play giant steps, he plays giant steps in any key with the walking bass line. He just has such a command of the instrument. But there might be something that's not 100% because, like, he can go play for 6 hours where I can't. You know what I mean? And like, it almost takes something for people to be so good or so creative. There's like a pact with the devil. Like, okay, you get all this, but you have all this stuff to come with, you know, to
Oh,
come with
totally.
it.
And
I think
you
I think it's and I think it's healthier for someone like me to go like, well, I'll never be able to create something like that, like Allan did, but I can take that and I can tell people that
Holdsworth, and this is the thing we've been talking around. So as much as it's the world's against him, he's his own worst enemy. You know, as much as he gave all this, he also didn't give this. All this, as much as we can understand and look at every single note and track it back to the harmonic bass, we also haven't got a clue what he's doing. I think, and it's because music's a mystery. John, we can sit here and talk for hours. I'm going to draw this to a close, and I'd love to.
It's all my fault. I'm sorry. I'm a big.
No, you've been brilliant. It's such a fascinating talk, and it's like, you know, I think you've gone so deep into this that it's almost endless. I could talk to you for hours because there's so much stuff there.
Yeah.
And
it's funny, that's why I don't get into gear, because I know I have a friend of mine that like changes tubes in between songs, and like Allan, like I know once you make that impetus of like I'm gonna change this, it's a never-ending hole. So I'm just 95% happy with my stuff. If I try to go 100%, it's never ending. But I guess I'd rather have that with the harmony and stuff than like how my guitar sounds. So I understand.
I'm gonna bring it to a close here, and thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I'm going to stop the recording now, and ladies and gentlemen, John Vullo, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.